Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Sprinkle, and this is the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. Today, I'm talking with Sean Bellefeuille. Sean is a vet student and co-founder of Med Dimensions, a 3D printing business helping pets and veterinarians with 3D models for pre-operative preparation and for teaching. I met Sean's co-founder at the Veterinary Innovation Summit, a conference that changed my life. Sean grew up in Montreal as an only child with pets as his siblings. Like a good Canadian, he also loves hockey, which is one of the reasons he came to the United States at a young age for boarding school. But I'll let Sean tell us more. Where did your interest in animals start?
I always had an interest in animals. I was really close to them, as I said, but I never actually had an interest in veterinary medicine until about partway through college. I didn't think that I would be able to kind of handle the profession and seeing animals in pain. So I knew I loved animals for sure. I always wanted to do something with either like rescue or something like that, but I never wanted to get into veterinary medicine till much later in my life, actually, which is very interesting.
No, that's good. I constantly tell people just because you love animals does not mean that you have to go to vet school. So that's very good thought process there. So let's back up just a little bit. So you grew up in Canada. And I happen to know that you ended up finding a university in the US. So why come to America? We're a bunch of crazy people down here. So what interested you in coming to school here?
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty long story, but I'd be more than happy to share it. I grew up playing hockey. Hockey was my life when I was really young. As most Canadians play hockey from the time they're young, so I played a lot. And then when I reached about 14, 15, that age, hockey was often paired with a school. So I was going to have to change schools where I was going. And I wasn't super happy with the different opportunities to continue to play a high level hockey and have a good school that was local and not have to move or stay with like a billet family or something like that. So we actually started looking into like boarding schools in the United States. So I actually left home around 15 and went to boarding school for 3 years of high school in Boston, in Massachusetts.
Oh,
And
wow.
after that opportunity and that experience, I applied to a variety of different schools in the States. I had some family actually near RIT in Rochester, New York, and ended up choosing that school. So it's kind of an interesting route, but basically, once I got into the States and I really liked it and I wanted to stay, and I saw a lot of opportunities with some of these amazing schools and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm just curious because while I've done lots of different school types, never been to boarding school. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. It was such a cool experience. I was very nervous when I started, and during the whole application process. It's very intense and very like formal, but the moment I got there, it's awesome. You have 3 to 7 or 8 people in the classroom, so you really get
Oh, wow.
great connections with professors. You're having to learn. You're not falling asleep in the back of the class because there's only 8 of you. You're really having to focus and concentrate, and a lot of opportunities to kind of like build that community, build close friendships. You're living in a dorm with other people and not having any siblings. I think that's one of the best things that I did, getting to learn how to live with people around me, almost like having, 8 to 12 other siblings and understanding how you have to share things and stuff like that. So I think that was really good for my personal growth. But just overall, I love the experience, the community. School was super important, but then sports were, and because it was such a small school, everybody's going to support everybody in their different sporting events, and there was a lot of school spirit and stuff like that. So it was just a really awesome experience.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The skills and ability to work with other people it was going to carry you through everything. So no, that's really interesting. And another thing that maybe you experienced there, something I firmly believe in is mentorship. Was there someone in particular that really supported you and you have a good memory of in that time?
Yeah, absolutely. There was quite a few people actually. When you start, you're paired with an advisor, as well as in kind of like the younger student dormitories, we have like a dorm parent that actually lived in the dorm, like their house was attached to the dorm, and they would check on us and stuff like that. So one of my dorm parents, Dr. Dolish, or Mr. Dolish, sorry, who he would always check on us and make sure everything was going well. And then my advisor retired pretty early when I went to boarding school, so I switched over to one of my hockey coaches who was an assistant, and I ended up having a really strong connection with him. We still talk almost once a week at this point, and I've been graduated since 2015 from high school. So just a great mentor, a great friend at this point as well. So I think it's really important. And I remember as I got older in school, when you saw some of the newer freshmen coming in and being a little nervous and stuff like that, I often would try to have leadership or mentorship type positions as well to help kind of give back. So I was captain of the hockey team. So, I would always try and take some of the younger kids under my wing and make sure that they felt comfortable. And then I also did some kind of these peer discussion groups where an older student would kind of talk with the younger students about different things about life and campus life and schooling, and making sure that everybody felt comfortable and everybody felt heard. So some of these different experiences that I got to go through as a younger student, and then I got to give back as an older student, were really cool.
Oh, wonderful. I think that might foreshadow a little bit when you go off to university as well. So, what were your thoughts going into Rochester?
Yeah, so it was a really interesting time for me. I had made a decision to kind of not pursue hockey at like a collegiate level, or even continue playing a couple years of juniors and putting off school and then going back and playing. So this was the first time that I was a full student, and that was my main role. So it was a really interesting time. I chose to do engineering. That's what I had applied for. A previous project in high school kind of lit that spark, especially with the medical side of engineering. But getting there and really focusing on school first, and that being kind of like my life, was a really humbling and a really different experience. That it was definitely hard at times, not always feeling like you're part of like a team or had a purpose and things like that. Luckily I found a club hockey team, and we played 3 or 4 times a week, so it was still really competitive and it was a good team there, but it was a really different experience, especially at the beginning.
Yeah. Do you mind telling us what that project was in high school? I'm curious.
Absolutely, yeah. So my school, they had what was called a STEM fellowship. They basically were trying to get younger students into STEM early on, and it was a really cool program. Basically, you proposed a project, and they kind of give you some resources and mentorship to help you through it. And my roommate and I were one day, we were kind of talking about like prosthetics. He had a local prosthetist in the town where he was from, and he was mentioning, he's like, maybe we could apply for a project. So we applied, and we actually ended up getting in together, working on it together. So it was a really cool experience. And not necessarily like we weren't the stereotypical group that would have applied for this program. Like, we were the two kind of hockey players getting in
The Jacks.
and working on it together. Exactly. And it ended up being a really great experience. I'd always kind of liked engineering in general. I loved Legos. That was kind of my go-to toy since I was little. And then kind of putting it together with like the medical side and prosthetics and learning a lot about that really interested me. And then when I started applying for schools, I was like, okay, engineering for sure. But then I started seeing like biomedical or biological engineering or medical engineering. And I was like, oh, that looks really cool, and goes with the prosthetics. So that's what really inspired me to pursue biomedical engineering.
So many people, I included, can relate to you about the feelings going into university. You came from a very tight school where it was small numbers. You had a lot of bonds and connections. You'd established some leadership, and then you go in bottom of the totem pole again, and not really sure, where you fit in. But so when did you start to kind of find your place at university?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, all those kinds of feelings were, maybe not necessarily fitting in, not knowing where your like what your purpose is or where you belong in this large group of people. Like you mentioned, my high school, I think we were about 350. So it's a very, very small school.
That's the
And
total school, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly.
Yeah. Some people are
Tiny.
like, my class was
Yeah,
4 times that. Yeah. There you
exactly. So tiny. And then, RIT has about, I think it's about 15 to 17,000 students at any point. So, going from classes where you're 8 to 10 to a class where you're 150. So it was a really interesting experience to start. I think when I started to feel most comfortable, I reached out and found the club hockey team. And that was a really good group for me to get to start working with and start playing again. I kind of started getting into a routine. But I would say the really when I started feeling the most comfortable and kind of that I found my purpose with school and like had my place was uh, one of my I guess one of my colleagues, one of my other students that was studying biomedical engineering, and we started a club called Bioprint. We had worked a little bit with 3D printing over one of the summers. We got really excited about it. And the lab that we were working with was kind of closing down or limiting access to students and being more for research purposes. So we wanted to try and find a way for students to still be able to learn these skills. And that's when we started Bioprint. And we worked with a lot of different types of projects to either help humans or animals. It's kind of how we looked at it. So we did some prosthetic work in both animals as well as on the human side. A quick example, one of the projects was a golfer had lost a couple of fingers in an accident, and we created a device to help him hold his club so that he could actually golf. So these kinds of cool projects that are kind of like not-for-profit projects that students could work on, get some experience designing and printing. And that club was really something that we were very proud of and that we worked on and kind of became our identity essentially.
Yeah. So this was the 3D printing club that you were talking about. And golfer Gary, I remember the story. It's a very amazing story that definitely stuck with me when I was first talking with you and Will about it. And so being able to 3D print something where he was able to golf again, which apparently he'd been doing most of his life, that was
Yeah.
a really big part of his life. You were able to bring that back to him, which is fantastic. So, you started the 3D printing club. Now, how did you personally start 3D printing and having an interest specifically in that type of technology?
Yeah, exactly. So the club was kind of started, I would say, in the middle of my second year, or sorry, towards the end of my second year and beginning of my third year. But I had done kind of an internship the summer of my first year in a 3D printing lab. It was a group called Enable. And basically what they do is they create low-cost prosthetics mostly for children. As children grow, they outgrow the prosthetics that they're given yearly or even twice a year. And they're so expensive that often children don't end up getting prosthetics till they're a bit older and they might not be growing as quickly. So as a group, we would try and create low-cost prosthetics based off 3D printing for these children. A lot of it was inspired by some work in Haiti that was done specifically after the big earthquake.
Mhm.
And I think it was 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of that work was inspired by that, and then kind of brought over to the States that there were also children here that needed prosthetics. So that's kind of how I really got into 3D printing. And it was interesting. 3D printing can be kind of scary initially, but this group just kind of threw you right into it. By the end of the summer, they were having me fix up the printers whenever they're going wrong. They were having me print things. So I kind of learned just by getting right into it and not really having a choice but to learn, which was the best way, honestly.
Sometimes we feel that way in veterinary medicine too.
I
Just
can
throw you
imagine.
right in. Okay, so you're in your second year. You've started this club, and this is also where you met Will too, right? When you founded the club. Yeah, and then he also the biomedical engineering department as well.
Yeah, so Will was actually a year younger than me. So I
Okay.
remember right after I had done that internship with 3D printing, the summer was ending, and then the new students were coming in, and there was like during orientation week, our program had some of the older students come in and talk about experiences and stuff. And since I had just done an internship on campus, they're like, oh, why don't you come and talk? And talked about 3D printing. And of course, towards the end of the session, Will comes up and he goes, 3D printing, can I get in on this? So that's kind of how we met. I introduced him to some people in the lab. He started working there as well. And then once the lab kind of closed down or closed access to students, we kind of came together and said, we need to figure out a way to continue this because it's awesome. 2, we're able to help people. And 3, we want to help other people learn about it as well.
Yeah, love that. And so if I've got my timeline right, this is about the same time that you decide to consider pursuing veterinary medicine. So what clicked here that made you want to go down that route?
Yeah, so I had what I like to call my quarter life crisis, where I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with engineering. And I particularly like medicine. Like a lot of our biomedical engineering courses, a lot of medical devices we learned about, and there was quite a bit of medicine involved as well. And it was really interesting to me. And I found myself wanting to learn more and more about how the body worked, how different physiological processes work and stuff like that. So I thought about, how can I continue this? Do I want to do maybe like a PhD? Do I want to go to medical school? Do I want to go to veterinary school? And some of the projects that we took on early on with the club kind of really solidified that idea to pursue veterinary medicine. So Will took on a lot of the human projects. So Golfer Gary, as we mentioned, Will was the main driver on that. And I got to work on a prosthetics project with a dog called Angus, who was a giant, a giant dog and really beefy dog. So Angus is a perfect
Angus
name
beef.
for him. Yeah, exactly. So I got to work on that and create a prosthetic device with a team at RIT, and that really got me interested in veterinary medicine as well. I got to meet a local surgeon who was the vet that was working with it. We had a great connection. We started working on a couple of different projects, and during that time, I was like, okay, I'm starting to like this a lot. I think this could be a good fit. I started shadowing a local vet as well to see, what the day-to-day life was like. I really liked it. So kind of around, I think I was saying my 3rd year, I was like, okay, well, I need to catch up now. So I need to learn everything that I can. So I was trying to get as many jobs so I could get vet hours and things like that. So the summer after my 3rd year, I think I had 2 or 3 different jobs. One is like a kennel attendant, one is an assistant in a surgical office. So I was just trying to get all that experience. And that's kind of when I decided, like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I know I'm late to the game, but I'm going to make up for it and try and get everything done.
You're never too late to pursue what you enjoy. So what was the story with Angus? Was this the one where the veterinarian came to you with the surgical dilemma?
That was a different
That was a
case, but
different
it was
one.
the same surgeon. So actually,
Okay.
basically right after we had met him, he was like, oh, like, you guys do cool 3D printing stuff. That's when he came to us with this, essentially this surgical case. So I can go into it a little bit and tell that story as well if
Yes,
you'd
please
like.
do.
Awesome. So he came to us about a particular case with a dog called Winston, about a 5-year-old mixed breed dog, and he had an angular limb deformity, so a complex orthopedic deformity, and Winston wasn't able to run around like a normal dog, and he was in a lot of pain and discomfort. So he asked us if we could 3D print Winston's bone. So at first we were like, not exactly sure how to, but we used some resources around us and put some time and effort into it. And then we were actually able to do it. So based off of a medical image, a CT scan, we were able to extract the data from that and 3D print a bone that mimicked Winston's bone. So Dr. Hoffman, the surgeon, was able to actually practice beforehand, visualize and mark up the model. And one of the coolest parts is that Will and I actually got to go and watch the surgery. And about midway through, he yells out to an assistant, somebody get me the model. And we watched as he referred to our model and the markings that he had made on the model pre-surgery to actually do the cut and have the perfect alignment. So that was a really, really cool experience. And once again, I think it was really like that experience in that moment that I was like, wow, like I want to do this and I want to try and use my engineering mindset and skills and see how I can help as well. So that was a really, really cool moment for us.
Oh, I bet it's when you see what you have done is really having the impact I think that's when the sparks fly and you're like, oh my goodness, I want to feel this over and over again. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of my biggest issues was that I felt like with engineering, sometimes there can be a disconnect between what you're doing and how you're helping people. And I wanted to see how my actions were actually, helping people or pets and in this particular situation. So that's why I wanted to pursue medicine a bit more, because I wanted to actually have like patient care and see how my actions were helping.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, was where was 3D printing at this time? Like when you're doing this, was there a lot of 3D printing in veterinary medicine at least? I know we tend to be a little behind, but were you kind of
Yeah.
some of the first people to trying this out?
So there were definitely some one-off cases here and there, where you'd hear 3D printing was happening. I know there was one particular case that got a lot of press where it was a dachshund that had a tumor on the skull, and they had done a 3D printed plate for it and removed the tumor. But they were really one-off cases. So after this particular surgery in this case, we started doing a lot of research and seeing, why this really wasn't available for veterinarians at the time. And we did a lot of research. We looked into it. The human side seemed to be getting it. And we came to a couple different conclusions that basically a lot of the big companies on the human side had really expensive printers, and the models or the different tools would be so expensive that vets couldn't afford it. And and the big companies couldn't afford to bring the prices down for veterinarians because they were going to lose money. So those kind of moments, all that research, we're like, if nobody else is doing it, let's do it ourselves.
So is this where the business ideas are starting to form? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we start to, kind of gather a group of students that we worked with the club and that had interest in this, and we started working together and okay, like we can do this. Like we can create some sort of a service to bring 3D printing into the veterinary market. We'll use lower cost printers, keep our prices down because of it. And then we'll try and make ourselves affordable and entering kind of their veterinary workflow. So we did a couple of different types of courses through RIT. RIT had a great entrepreneurship program where you started off basically taking a class, you learn the basics of creating a business, the business model, canvas, some of these different elements. And then once you're ready, they then had an accelerator that we took part in. And kind of during that accelerator is when we said, okay, we actually have something here. We want to continue to pursue it. And then that's when we actually formed a business.
Yeah. I think I remember Will talking about when you and he walked into the class and you were the only engineers and everybody else were like business majors and you felt a little bit out of the ordinary there.
Oh
But
yeah.
the you said you gathered some other students as well to start working on this idea. What else were these students? Were they all engineering majors or were they diverse? What did that team look like?
Yeah. So the team, the initial team that we gathered, so Will and I were the two biomedical engineers. Will was always more of a printer focus. He has an incredible mind for 3D printers. He can fix them. He can do just about anything with them. I was more concentrated on the clinical side. And then Jake was a mechanical engineer, so he was really focused on design and testing and different things like that. And then Michael, who studied marketing, we had kind of brought him in with bioprint earlier. We were trying to like kind of market it. We had made a website. He did a lot of the help with that. And then he was also one of the students that pushed us and said, I think we have something here as well. Like we should pursue this. So we brought him on as well to help with like the marketing, and he had some business background too. But like you said, Will and I were the only two that actually did the accelerator, and walking into some of those lectures or some of the guest speakers that came in, it was really kind of intimidating, honestly, at the beginning. I remember like one of our first tasks to do was give an elevator pitch of what you do. We were like, oh boy. And, we did not do well to start off, but by the end of the summer, we had improved so much and we had learned so much. And it was just, it's a very different perspective. And I think it was really helpful for us to learn all of this and from our perspective as well, because we do bring a different perspective than somebody that's just business minded or something like that.
No, I love it. And again, I am definitely a proponent for diverse working groups. And veterinarians bring a very unique perspective to multiple situations, and we just enhance the whole project and make it impactful. So I love that. Who was there somebody who also was very influential in getting and helping you get this to a business model?
Yeah, so the different programs that RIT offered, they usually offered a mentor to help you out. So we had a gentleman by the name of Don Pofel. So he worked in engineering as well, which is I think why we kind of had the connection at first. He was kind of a professor that guided kind of like senior design teams. Typically, when you do an engineering degree, your last year you have some sort of senior project. So he was a guide for those types of projects, and then he also did some entrepreneurship guidance and mentorship. So we connected with him, and he really helped us, honestly, like go from an idea that wasn't really formulated, and then creating a whole business around it, and creating ideas and how to bring together, marketing and cost. And it was a lot of learning. We came in, we said, oh, we have this idea, we're golden, like we don't need to do anything because we already have our product. And we learned that typically it's actually the opposite that happens. You start finding kind of the problem, trying to come up with solutions, and then your prototype is one of your last things sometimes that you actually come up with. So we kind of came in backwards, and he helped us a lot learn and accept that we had to think about this as an entrepreneur, or as like from a business perspective too, because it was really important for growth. So he was really, really influential. He still, we still talk to him once a month, once every 2 weeks. He's one of our advisors for our business right now. But that kind of mentorship, was really key. And I don't think we would be where we are today without the different people that helped us out. The other person I want to mention is Dr. Hoffman, the surgeon. Throughout that entire time, he stuck with us, and he helped us out and advised us in kind of like on a veterinary perspective. He would test the different models that we would create. If he had a particular case, then he would have us do a model for him. So he was also very, very supportive, and just a great personal mentor, specifically for me, because he was able to help me get some work at the hospital he worked at as well. But he also just helped the entire team too.
No, he sounds really unique because number one, because he came to you, I believe. So he was very out of the box thinking, how can I help my patients in a different way? And he was able to be open and ask you, is this an opportunity that we can try? And then it sounds like he's also very good in just mentorship in general and helping you kind of get the experience you need to get into vet school, which is kind of the next step, right? So you've got this business going, and how, can you kind of bring us into transitioning into now you're a vet student as well?
Yeah, it's quite the interesting transition, because the whole pandemic happened during that time
Oh
too.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, I applied for vet school. I ended up getting into Cornell, which was technically my in-state, even though I'm Canadian, because I had been in the States for so long and I had worked multiple jobs and I have dual citizenship. I was actually able to get in-state status, so that was just kind of a perfect fit. So then pandemic kind of hit. We started online, so that was quite a transition. Yeah, and then now I'm here my second year at Cornell, but the transition was definitely difficult, going from engineering to like a vet school type of education. I mean, engineering is so math based, and you don't have to memorize a lot. You have to kind of understand concepts. So going right into anatomy, which is a lot of memorization, there's definitely a lot of concepts that you have to understand. And that's kind of where I was able to kind of use my previous education. But memorizing was a really big struggle at the beginning. I mean, vet school in general, I know is, for most people, is going to be a struggle to start. But it took me a while to get used to it. And then when we started getting into things like physiology, the concepts, the different processes, procedures, that's kind of how I think, and it started getting a bit better. But some of the memorization at the beginning and changing the way I think was really tough for sure.
Yeah. Now, how has going through veterinary school helped you in on your business side?
I mean, it's been amazing. So many people have been so supportive. Cornell in general. Just if I email a professor and I have any questions, or if I see how can I help you out, everybody is so receptive to it. Um, in terms of like my learning, it's been really helpful. Like learning anatomy now being like, oh, like how can we use the anatomy to create models to help students? How can we practice procedures and how can we create models to help with those procedures? So it's been incredibly helpful in terms of some of the clinical connections that we've made with the different professors, the surgeons, as well as some of the educational side. And as I'm growing my knowledge in the veterinary field, I'm able to make better decisions about types of products, types of models, and things like that. And I'm actually able to help advise our group on directions for projects and things like that as I continue to grow.
Yeah, so and you're the Med Dimensions, which is the name of your 3D printing business. You have two big areas of focus. You have pre-surgical models to help surgeons plan procedures, but then you also have a very large education component. Is did that kind of come from you going through vet school and seeing some opportunities for better educational models?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, surgery, kind of those surgical models, specifically from that one case that happened during my undergrad time. That was something that we had thought, oh, well, this is what we're going to be going with for sure. That's going to be the main focus. But as specifically as you mentioned, as I've been at Cornell as a student, I've learned that there are so many opportunities to help students as well as new grads. One of the biggest things I learned here and realized is how much stuff there is to know, which I know obviously sounds like, of course, but like, how many types of procedures you have to know, but you have to do it on a dog, on a cat, on a cow, on a horse, and all of that, all those different types of procedures, different tools you have to learn how to use. It's a great opportunity to create resources to help students as well as new grads that you can't hit everything in school. There's so many different types of procedures that you're bound to have not actually done one before you have to do it for the first time. And that's kind of where the whole educational model aspect came to life. And we're like, okay, we can create these models to help students get confidence and get some basic hands-on skills so that the first time they're doing the procedure, it's not an alive animal.
Yes, you are bringing back vet school memories. One of the things that I was so bad at was palpating cows. So if you can come up with a really good cow palpating model, I will go back and try.
Perfect.
um, but what's one of your favorite models you've created for an educational purpose?
I think my favorite one, because I think it's most like striking, but also it's extremely useful, and I haven't seen many ways to do it. Is essentially it's an airway model. So we were able to take a scan and isolate the airway from essentially like the animal's throat all the way down to the bronchi, the bronchioles, and things like that. So for procedures like bronchoscopy, where you're putting a scope in to the airway to see if there's any type of debris, any type of like neoplasia, things like that, the the ways to practice beforehand just weren't great. Often they were either practicing on live animals that were sedated, that is not necessarily something you want to do. If you have supervision, that's great, but you want to be able to get some hands-on experience beforehand. And this model allows you to actually practice, and we can insert like nodules or different types of pathology in there so that students can actually be like, oh, I see this mass, that's where it is, and things like that. So that model I think is really cool. And like I mentioned, it's quite striking. It's very big and it has like a very unique shape to it that you're like, what exactly is that? But then you put the scope in and you look actually at what you're seeing, and it looks exactly as it's supposed to.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable. So I've heard a lot of different programs in different universities talk about endoscopy labs and sending their residents to pretty advanced endoscopy labs, because that's definitely something you would probably want to practice on a couple of times, preferably not a living creature. Or
Yeah.
and oh, and I think I heard you describe the disadvantages of even using cadavers with practicing there, because you said like the airways collapse, so it's not really a great representation of what they're going to see in a living animal, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of our goals is to decrease the use of cadavers if they don't need to be used. Often as veterinary professionals, we need to practice, and cadavers are, kind of the gold standard for practicing a lot of different types of procedures or learning for the first time. But for certain procedures, we have better ways to do it. Like you mentioned, for using bronchoscopy, the airways typically collapsed in a cadaver. So it's not going to be the same as when an animal's actually breathing and when you're having to, the airways open and expanding and closing, different things like that. So for sure, it's better ways to learn.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm also really curious, how do you believe going through like this entrepreneur mindset training, how has that impacted you coming through on a medical side, that you think?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. I think some of the things, it's kind of given me a different perspective and a way to look at things. I find myself often approaching a lot of situations now more from a business mind than before. And, looking at whether it's a procedure, looking at how much money it might cost, or looking at like just costs in general. We know that, veterinary costs are increasing, just as like costs for every medical procedure is increasing with new technology, but trying to figure out how to maintain low costs on different types of procedures and things like that. It's just kind of a different way of approaching situations. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's kind of the way that I see procedures, or I see opportunities. Or like often I'll be in class and someone's like, well, there's nothing that we can do for this particular procedure. Then I'm like, okay, like I start thinking about it. Is there a way to do something? Is there a solution that might be able to be created for it? So it's just kind of, I guess, the mindset that I'm approaching some of the things with.
Your entrepreneurial brain triggers you hear a problem, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, how can I get to the solution? That's actually really, really valuable. And I think I see a lot of veterinarians who might think that way as well too, right? We see, at least I do. Maybe I'll speak for myself. I zone in when I hear a problem. It's like, ooh, let's think about this. Let's brainstorm different ways that we can solve it. So
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
very, very cool. I one thing I wanted to touch on is that I think veterinarians are just so creative in general, um, because of whether it's the differences in species or the differences between breeds. We have to do so much problem solving, and I'll often like speak to vets, often in like a GP, a smaller practice or something, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got this solution that we put together cardboard and tape and everything, and it's perfect. And I'm like, wow, that's genius. Like that's so smart. And like, they have all these little like techniques or little tools that they've done. And I'm like, that's really cool way to approach it. Whereas like often in human medicine, where everything is so standardized, you don't always see that creativity just in like a small local practice or something like that. So it's been awesome working with a lot of vets, because one of the things that we've been able to do is take some of their ideas and their projects and their research, and kind of give them some of the engineering tools and the engineering backing that they need to, pursue that more. And that's been really enjoyable to see them be able to just further their research, or further their teaching, which has been really cool.
Is there an example you can share?
Yeah, so we're working with a particular anesthesiologist to create. He had this really cool airway tool that he needed for data, to get data on breathing, and he didn't necessarily have an engineering team that could make it. And he said, hey, I found this design online. It's already designed. All we would need to do is like be produced. I don't know where to go about that. And I was like, absolutely. We can help for sure. So we were able to make this device, and then, he's been able to hook it up to his machine and actually gather breathing data. And then he talked to me a couple of weeks later. He's like, well, we kind of want a holder for it. So we were like, okay, we'll design some sort of holding fixture so we can hold it in the perfect place and it's stable. So it's something that was just like really cool to help out. And I'm really glad that we were able to, help him do some cool research and, give him some of the tools that he might not have had access to, or that if he wanted to work with a typical engineering firm would have cost thousands and thousands of dollars for something that honestly was pretty simple to make with the use of low cost printing and some design software.
How exciting for your business to be able to work with so many different projects and individuals. And that's actually a question I wanted to ask you. You've worked with lots of different individual veterinarians, universities, research, teaching, all of these things. What do you feel like you've learned from working with all these areas about veterinary medicine?
I think I've learned a couple of things about the veterinary world in general, and that it's a very close-knit community and everybody always wants to help each other out. And that's one thing that I've learned personally, that if anybody ever reaches out to me, wants help, whether it's a student that's trying to apply to vet school, wants to hear about, some of the work that we do, how they might be able to get involved with things like that, I always say yes and try and help out as many people as possible, because so many people have helped us out and helped me out. But just in terms of the veterinary world in general, it's just the creativity and the passion. Everybody that's in this field, it's not really because of money. It's often because of passion, because of wanting to, to help animals out. And it's just been so cool to see that passion on display, whether it's, like I mentioned, this particular anesthesiologist that wants to do this cool cutting edge research, or whether it's, Dr. Hoffman in Rochester that wants to make sure that his patient gets the best care that, they can get with a model or with, different surgical tools. I just think that passion is something I've seen a lot of, and it's very inspiring.
Yeah. So from here, you've got a couple more years in vet school, but what do you want for your future? Where do you see yourself in a few years?
Yeah, that's a hard question. It's something that I think about a lot. I definitely want to practice in some respect. This this 4 years, I mean, I'm about halfway through, a little bit less than halfway through now. It's very hard. It's challenging. It. Like it's very rewarding, but it's also very challenging. And I want that to mean something. I want to be able to actually take what I've learned and help animals directly. My goal would be probably to have some sort of situation where I could do part-time work as either a GP or an emergency or something like that, and then work part-time for Med Dimensions as well, and help out with the research on the veterinary side and stuff like that. Some sort of combination of both. I originally really wanted to specialize, and it's still something that I am interested in. But the long residency and stuff like that kind of worries me a little bit at this point. So we'll see where I fall in a couple of years.
I don't want you to feel like I'm making you commit right now either. It's okay to change. And in fact, I encourage you to stay curious, continue to help people and find what makes you feel good. And it doesn't necessarily require a specialty to get there. Now, I'm really excited for you and what Med Dimensions is getting to do.
Yeah, we've grown. We're up to about seven employees now, either part-time or full-time. We're taking on some larger projects and stuff like that. Things are going great. We've got a lab in Ontario, New York, about half hour from Rochester, and we've got 4 or 5 different rooms with printers or silicone manufacturing, and molds in it. So things are going really well, and we're slowly growing and getting there. But it's been great.
Does the business itself have some goals that you're
Yeah,
looking for?
our goal is just to really kind of grow both on the surgical side and the educational side. Those are kind of our 2 main pillars. On the surgical side, we want to go past just the models. We want to do actual like intraoperative devices to help with like surgery. So like implants, as well as things like cutting and drilling guides for more accurate cuts and for drilling. And then the educational side, we want to start creating more encompassing models that encompass multiple procedures or multiple types of tissues and organs. So we're working on like spay and neuter models, so students can practice beforehand before they have to do their first one, or different things like that that are a bit more involved than just a bone or just like a vein or something like that. We want to have kind of like full solutions.
Being able to have different models to practice more, I think is really going to make veterinarians more comfortable and confident going into practice, because that's a hard transition. It's hard enough to transition from undergrad to vet school, but to go from vet school into a practice of some sort is also very, very different and a challenge as well. So anything we can do to help that transition, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in school and I can't even like imagine, like we're doing, I think we do a spay next fall as part of like the curriculum. And I'm like, my gosh, like I want to practice, I want to watch as many videos as I can on it. I want to actually get hands-on practice. So I can't imagine when you actually have to do this every day, you get possibly thrown into procedures that you've never done, with mentorship there or not. But there's just, like I said, it's so vast. And as technology and science and medicine continues to progress, it's like more and more every year. So there's definitely a lot to be prepared for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Going into a rapid fire question. That's a great way to end. If you could create one law or rule that everyone had to follow, what would it be?
Oh boy. I just think that everybody should have a cat. I'm a big cat guy. I think that everybody deserves to have a cat. Whether they want it or not, they're going to end up loving it.
Life lesson right there. Own a cat. Love it. What's your favorite way to spend a non-work or non-school day?
Yeah, I still love to play hockey. I play in a local men's league right now. So, we play Sundays and sometimes Wednesdays. It's great. Get my mind off of everything and just concentrate on skating and, shooting the puck. And that's definitely something I love to do.
Let the brain have a break.
Exactly.
What is a snapshot of a simple moment that brings you joy?
I just think about, so I live with my girlfriend in Ithaca and we have a dog and 2 cats. And, I just think of sometimes when we're sitting on the couch watching TV, the dog's between us, one cat's on her, the other cat's on me. And I just think that's like one of my favorite things.
Okay, that sparks another question. So what's your favorite thing to watch? Favorite TV show, movie?
I love watching The Office. It's a classic TV show. Office or New Girl, good sitcom. Just don't have to think about it. Just put it on.
That is a good one. All right. Last question. What is one thing you are deeply grateful for?
I think just the support that my family in general throughout this entire process, the fact that I left so young, I can't imagine that was easy for them as an only child, but they knew it was best for me. So they pushed me to do it. And then, being in Rochester, New York, 2 of my aunts live around there, and I was able to spend a lot of time with them. And that was really, really meaningful for me. And they've supported me in as many ways as they can. So just my family in general supporting me this entire time, despite the fact that sometimes I had no idea what I was going to do, or other times I was like, I'm launching a business, and that's how life is. They've always supported me through everything.
Family is everything. Well, thank you, Sean, so much for sharing with us your story. I really hope this inspires a lot of people to think outside the box, even if you're in clinic, reaching out to someone who has these ideas, who can help you really bring ideas to life, I think is very exciting for our profession. So thank you for everything that you do. Just like every model Sean prints has a story, we all have a story. The Vet Life Reimagined podcast is meant to share some fascinating vet lives who have found their unique way to impact the world. What about you? Thank you for supporting the mission. If you like this podcast, please share it with someone you think would appreciate it and give it a great rating and review. This podcast is also on YouTube if you want to watch the discussion along with illustrations of what we discuss. Until next time.